Has anyone ever explained why if 3 out of 4 of your grandparents were white, you're black, but if 3 out of 4 of your grandparents were black, you're also black? You know what I mean?
Well, there are all sorts of reasons for that, and we won't go into that because we're all sensitive to that kind of thing. But the point to me is that if you are, particularly of all of these bloods, you belong to everybody, and that's the way I've always felt about myself. And when they say you don't belong to us and you don't belong to us, and there weren't enough Cherokee Indians left to get in contact with, then I felt that since I was so rejected by everybody that I had to find my own way to be related to somebody. So I've accepted everybody, and I hope that everybody has accepted me. I don't give a damn about what race calls me their own.
Yeah. What if a man... Certainly not yours. They say there has to always be somebody you can be prejudiced against, or the world will come apart, you know, and it seems the finger seems to move from race to race over the years, but maybe not fast enough.
One of the fascinatingly interesting things to me is Alex Haley, who went back and looked, you know, the Roots route and all of that sort of thing. We found that, and the last thing that he did on a Sunday afternoon, I think it was after Roots. This was rather recently, it was on television. And in that church, in the area in which those people were brought there as slaves, everyone, the cotton plantation owners and Alex Haley's family are all now so mixed up that nobody knows who belongs to whom, and everybody belongs to everybody, which I thought was absolutely fantastic. The whites and the blacks are all mixed up now.
And there's no way in this world you will ever know who your ancestors were specifically on one side. If suppose a man came to the door somewhere you're working and could prove that he was your father, and someone said, there's a man outside who is your father, do you want to say hello to him?
Well, I'd say hello to him. Anybody can be my father.
Well, but if you thought he really were, would you tell him a thing or two about how he might have managed to show up a little sooner?
No, I don't think so, because I think that I've done all right.
Yeah.
I don't want to make anybody feel that they were guilty and not doing what was intended to do or should have been done by legal isms and all of that. No, God has taken care of me very well, and I'm very happy for that.
Good for you. What really did happen? Could you relive quickly and briefly, if you're tired of telling it, that fateful day in Washington when you went to the White House and Lady Bird Johnson invited you, among others, to sit and talk?
Well, I got an invitation from Mrs. Johnson that said, why is there so much juvenile delinquency in the streets of America? Now, this was in 1968. And it was because of some work that I have been doing and continuously doing, working with underprivileged children in all areas of the world, in New York and now also with an organization called Kidsville in Los Angeles. And in Washington, when I was there with the Owl and the Pussycat, I was involved with a group called Rebels with a Cause, who came to my dressing room at the National Theater and asked me to be their spokesman because Washingtonians do not have representatives, so to speak. And I went around Washington and I saw what they were showing me, the poverty-stricken areas that had been built in 1937 that hadn't even been paved, and people were living in very squalid conditions and not even hot water. And they showed me what was happening to the poverty money, which was not being used quite properly. And we were responsible for getting something like 5 areas of Washington cleaned up within about 2 years' time. So when I got the invitation, it was because Hubert Humphrey had referred me to Mrs. Johnson because of the kind of work that I have been doing, and also the fact that in each country that I travel into, the boys who had been running away from America because they did not want to be involved in the Vietnamese War, because they feel that we should not have been involved in the Vietnamese War, would also come to my dressing room and tell me what their feelings were. And when I got the invitation, why there is so much juvenile delinquency in the streets of America, I raised my hand because all of the things that were being said to me were not very constructive.
This is there in the White House now.
Yes. They were saying things like, well, when I see a little boy about to throw a stone, we walk over to him and tap him on the shoulder and say, you mustn't do that. Or we feel that, these are what women were saying, that we should build bigger street lights so if we are going to be attacked that we can at least see who is attacking us. And we should put bigger flower pots on the windows of the ghettos of America. And it was absolutely nonsense to me. I said, I thought when I raised my hand finally, Mrs. Johnson gave me the floor, and I asked her the question, don't you think we have missed out on something here this afternoon? I thought the question of the day was, why is there so much juvenile delinquency in the streets of America? Do you think it might not have something to do with our involvement in Vietnam? Because our boys feel that it does not pay to be good. If you are good and be brought up by the Ten Commandments, it is our parents have brought the children up. I'm a mother myself. You know the pains of bearing a child. Even though we only have girls, we still bear the pain, and the pain is very rewarding. And then the children get to an age where they are about to go out on their wings and practice the Ten Commandments. Suddenly some foreign matter snatches them away from us and throws them off into a war that says, thou shalt kill, thou shalt steal, thou shalt do everything against the Ten Commandments. Don't you think it might have something to do with our involvement in Vietnam? Well, I don't know how long I talked, but suddenly the room became extremely quiet.
No more mention of flower pots.
No. But when I sat down, it was also terribly interesting to me because the lady who was sitting to my right put her hand on my thigh and whispered to me with her head down. And this is a free democratic country that we're living in, right?
Yeah.
We're not supposed to be living in fear of our government. But with her head down, she whispered to me, thank you, Eartha, for saying what you're saying. We would all like to say the same thing, but unfortunately, most of our husbands work for Mr. Johnson. So a lot of those women who were there were not outsiders. They were in with Mrs. Johnson. So it was all like a propaganda for Mr. and Mrs. Johnson.
It does take a lot of nerve to do what you did, however, whether you planned it ahead of time or it was a spontaneous
it was not
feeling
planned
of the moment.
beforehand.
Clearly it
So
was the
cannot plan.
latter.
But within 2 hours after that luncheon, and it just took until 1975 for me to get this dossier, because I didn't even know it until 1975 that I was suddenly cut off from the American public.
Yes, your career took a conspicuous nosedive at that point, and just to film, a dossier was gotten. I believe Seymour Hersh of the Times called you, did he?
Yes, he did.
Or was it the Jack Anderson column, or both, in which you realized the extent to which they had been snooping?
Yes.
And was it dated after the White House incident?
The dossier says that 2 hours after the luncheon, President Johnson picked up the telephone and called across the nation networks and said, I do not want to see that woman on the air.
Do you think that's true?
It's what's on the dossier.
Yeah.
And this is CIA and FBI.
Was he in the room to see this happen? He wasn't actually
No,
present?
it was reported to him afterwards. Yeah. He was not. He came in, which was also terribly funny to me too, because the ladies were sitting around, were looking at the tablecloths and looking under the plates to see if they were Limoges or Dresden or whatever. And they were very concerned as to whether President Johnson was going to come in and pass out autographs. So you can feel the consensus of the opinions of the people of that day. Yeah. And when this man walked in, Dick, he went over to the rostrum that was, for some reason or the other, sitting in the middle of the room that we were having lunch in, put his elbow on the rostrum and said, I want you all to know how wonderful it is for the first family to invite the common people to have lunch with us.
Oh, you are.
That is the honest truth.
Maybe it's a joke that fell flat.
Well, it fell awfully flat on me.